Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet, Rabbi of the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shemin in Highland Park, New Jersey. Joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter Day School, Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, Anshe Chesed in New York City. It's great to see you guys. We're recording this on a Friday, the Erev Shabbat. This is one of the last moments before Shabbat. We've all had busy weeks. It's great to now delve into what I want to say is not only an amazing parsha, but it's probably the most consequential parsha in the book of Bamidbar, the pivotal parsha, the turning point. If we can just elaborate on that for a second, because we know what's going to happen. Let's just take the topic notes of the parsha. That is, this is where Moshe dispatches 12 scouts to look at the land. The scouts come back with a negative report, and from there we get the sentence that the people of Israel are to journey into the desert for 40 years. So that's the crisis. Going into it, the parsha begins like this. Vayadeber Adonai el Moshe lemor, Shelach Lekha anashim. Send, you send, Moshe, you send, anashim, men. Vayaturu et Eretz Canaan, and go explore the land of Canaan. Asher ani noten livnei Yisrael, that I am giving to the children of Israel. Ish echad lematei avotav tishlachu. One man for every tribe of your father, of their fathers, shall be sent. Kol nasi bahem. Each one a prince. So we have so many questions even about the first verse here. Why? And what's the purpose of dispatching the scouts? What's going on here? Is there a setup here, or is there a challenge here? Why is Moses, and how does the story then figure into the life of Moses? We'll talk about how he reflects upon it even later on. Barry, I'm going to turn to you to explain some of the motivation here behind sending, and maybe you can elaborate on, what's at stake here, what's going on.
So the first thing that catches our attention, I think, is the formulation Shelach Lekha, you shall send, which echoes the first commandment to Abraham, or Avram at the time, in Breshit, Parak Bet, chapter 12 of the book of Genesis, when God says, Lach Lecha, you shall go. And what's important to notice here is that in Genesis, Abraham is told to go, and he goes. Here, Moses is told to send forth. And the question that we have to ask is, why does he not go himself? And I think that what we're seeing here is the beginning of a shift in leadership that we often forget when we read most of the Torah, that Moses is 80 years old. He's lived a long life already, even though he's got 40 more years to go, we know at the end. But I think that what we're seeing here is an attempt to transfer leadership to the younger generation, and therefore the spies are going out not as Moses's colleagues, his peers, but as the next generation, the people that are supposed to inherit the land and build the Israelite community there. And so he sends 12 men, each of them a prince, and to see how they will gauge the land. They've grown up in Egypt, they've been miraculously redeemed. They're now in the wilderness. They're close enough to the land where they can enter it speedily. And what are they going to do with it? They have come all this way, and now they're at the gates.
Okay, so just to interject here, we've already seen 12 leaders of the tribes, right? Back in Parshat Naso a couple of weeks ago, we had a very long, elaborate parade of gifts, over 12 days, with people like Nachshon ben Amidav and El Yosef ben Deuel and all those people. So why not those? Why these? Here we have Shamua ben Zakur, Shaphat ben Chori. We have Palti ben Rafu, Amiel ben Gamali, Setur ben Michael. They're actually, the names sound a little different than the names that we saw in Naso, the tribal chieftains. So are you saying that, and here I'm going to lead you here, I want to think this might be the younger generation? They're there.
Yeah, I think so. I think the ones that we meet in the first chapter of the book of Numbers are the adults in the room. They're the leaders of the tribes, and now we're sending a new generation.
I think it's very difficult to, the Torah actually, it's not always consistent. I mean, back in Exodus, one of the first things that happens as they leave Egypt is they fight this battle with Amalek, and Yehoshua ben Nun is the chief general. Okay, it doesn't really make sense to think that that Yehoshua is presented here in Numbers 13, in which he's actually called Hoshea ben Nun, and Moses gives him this new nickname of Yehoshua, indicating that he will be a source of salvation. That it's like the same conceptualized character. We've seen a bunch of different aspects of Yehoshua. He is Moshe's Na'ar. He's Moshe's like junior servant.
He's his body man.
He's his body man. So, I mean, it could well be so that this is the younger generation. Perhaps the inclusion of Joshua then, because he was that big general back in Parashat Shelach, maybe we just read those two things differently, or we say that they're it's called out Darshani in some way or another. I feel that the need to bring in these miraglim, although as we discussed before we started recording, the tradition calls them miraglim, the spies. That word actually doesn't appear in the parasha. It appears in what will be the Haftarah, the spies who get sent to check out Jericho. I feel that there is a fundamentally good plan, which is to say that the job for the people coming up in conquering the Promised Land is going to be massive, is going to be totally transformative. It is going to shape everything that comes in its wake. And so what I think is going on here, and this is the Shelach Lekha, send for your own benefit, is to, it doesn't work, but it is, the point of it is to win the excitement, the enthusiasm, the commitment that really have to get their deep skin in the game for all the tribes to rise to the occasion of what is before them. And the attempt, which as we know doesn't really succeed, but the attempt is to say each and every group among us, each and every sector of society, we all need our best people to buy in, to be committed, and to play their own leadership role in what is about to ensue.
Can we talk for a minute about Kalev and Yoshua? Because these two they end up being the minority. They will render the positive opinion about the land. But we know, of course, that Yoshua has a very, very special relationship with Moshe. Already, we've seen him he's the Misharet Moshe. I call him the body man. He's really, next, and he will be designated as the leader. He's the leader designate, basically. So already we know that he's younger. Kalev, a little more ambiguous or cloudy about who Kalev is. Of course, the tradition makes Kalev into almost a relative of Moshe. There's one source that says that Kalev was Moses' brother-in-law, that he may have been the second husband of Miriam. What I'm saying is that by selecting Yoshua and Kalev, Moses is putting loyalists in the group. And the loyalists are the people that will not only represent Moses to the group, but they will represent the group to Moses. And that, I think, causes a bit of instability. That is to say that this group already has factions among it. The Yoshua Kalev faction is already embedded in there from the beginning. It's destabilizing. And so go ahead, comment on that, Jerry.
No, so you feel like you feel like Moses tried to put his thumb on the scale a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. I just wanted to comment on one thing you said, the good report of the land. Actually, I think that everybody gives a good report of the land. Moshe asks them, go check out the land, see if it's a good land, or bad. If it is abundant or poor, if there's lots of trees or not. There's not really a question. He's in each of those cases. This is the promised land which God has sworn to our ancestors. Go see if it stinks. Okay, it doesn't stink. The land is good. And the people come back with, yeah, man, this land is great. What they come back with a bad report about is themselves.
Yeah.
Right? They come back not that the land that God swore to Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov and promised us all these generations we've been getting, but it's not the land is bad. The land is terrific. But we're not up to the task. And so, I find it incredibly stirring, the Caleb and Yehoshua, or really it's just Caleb. Yehoshua is a kind of along for the ride, in which he gives the speech and says, Alon Na'aleh, let's go up, Yachol Nuchala, we're up to this, we can do it. And and not to turn this into a contemporary Zionist allegory, which I think is actually quite misplaced, because it can make you do stupid things, but it's kind of the story of much of Zionism is right. Like, oh, you can't do that. Oh, yes, we can. Actually, watch us. We in fact did.
I think, I mean, not to focus too much on it, but Zionism, on some level, was a deliberate inversion of this.
To be the Caleb people.
Absolutely, to deliberately invert the negative sense that we can't do this. No, that Zionism is, we can do this. Yachol nuchal, we can do this, and yes, we're outnumbered. Yes, but we will prevail. We have no choice. Zionism.
So there is another political dimension to this, and we have to imagine the Israelites. They've been wandering now for over a year, and I think the charge that Moses gives to the spies is this land more the same, like where we've been the last year, or is this really the promised land? We know it's the promised land, but how are they supposed to know? And we take a lot of things for granted, I think, sometimes when we read the story, that we have to unimagine, as it were, because the Israelites don't know they're going. I mean, they know they're going to the promised land, but they don't know what the promised land is. It's not a land that they've ever been to before. And so when they get there, they have to cross a river, as we know. And I remember the first time I saw the Jordan River, I wondered what the fuss was. It looked like a little ribbon that you could step over. They need to know that they've reached their destination. And the land, as Jeremy pointed out, is a different land. It's not where they've been. It is a land worthy of inhabiting. And the question, of course, is whether they're going to be the worthy inhabitants.
So what do you do about the image? So the 10 of the 12 spies agree that the land is great, and they sap people's enthusiasm, and they say we're not up to it, and they're much bigger than we are, and we're going to get our butts kicked if we do this. They're giants in the land, and there's a detail in that strikes me as kind of it's the logo of the tourism ministry in Israel, and it's that they come and they bring abundant, totally amazing fruit. They bring these the branches, vine branches, so heavy that it takes 2 guys to carry. So if the 10 spies, I know, Elliot, you feel that they're kind of destructive and nihilistic, which you should elaborate on that. If they want to ruin it, if they want to break it, why bring the fruit? The fruit is gonna only serve as evidence that it's worth trying. You might fail, but
no, I think the fruit actually lends itself to 2 different interpretations. You could bring the fruit and say, look how wonderful this fruit is. It takes 2 of us to carry it. Or you could say, we could barely manage this fruit. This land is not for us. So I think it works on both levels, and each person has to decide whether this is the fruit that we want to eat, or the job is too burdensome for us. We'll let it be.
We're not worthy. We're not worthy of this fruit, right?
I think this is a in a sense, this is a macro question about religion. God is great, people stink. Like that, one way to look at religion is that God is great, world is great, people stink, people sin, people fail, and perhaps that's the religious attitude of the spies. God promises land to the great Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and God is totally right. This is fabulous. And look at us in our miserable poverty. We're just not up to that, as Barry said. This fruit is like a symbol of divine blessing. We can't handle that. As opposed to the other version, which is in the words of the rabbis, to be shutaf lakadosh baruch hu b'maaseh breshit, God's partners in creation. God is great, and people are great, and in fact, we and God work together, and that's more of the Kalev and Yehoshua view.
So I'm just going to ask, a kind of elementary question. What's the frame in which we need to see the story? Is this a setup for failure, or is this the story that has all the best intentions, that Moses is like, yeah, go get the land, go see. I want to engage this group as a group that will be my eyes and ears, that will be my agents, my public relations agents for the project that will come. And I'm so excited about this. I'm so delighted about this. But in order to do this effectively, I need you. I need your partnership here. Go see, and because you will see, you will have legitimacy because you are the first-hand witnesses to the land, and that's how I want it to go. Right? What's the frame here? Is it? I mean, and this, in some ways, this question mirrors the conflict or a bit of a debate among commentaries. You have Rashi on the one hand saying that this was basically a setup for failure, and you have Ramban saying, no, this is, l'simcha, in order to elicit positive feeling and joy, and that you are going to be the public relations arm. What do you think?
Wait, what's the talk me through why the setup for failure kind of makes sense?
Because they should have known. They should have known. It's like the setup for failure is uh, Moses. I've already told you that the land is good, right? Because at the burning bush, God has already said to Moses that the land is good. Following the burning bush episode, it's Eretz Megurehem. So there's a knowledge that the land is good, that the land was promised, and that the land has ancestral heritage to it. Our fathers have been in that land. Okay, so in a sense, he doesn't need to go. It doesn't need to send anybody there. So the only reason why would be to see what they do as a test, basically. And as we all know,
So I want to offer a slightly different interpretation. I think the purpose of the mission is to ascertain what the land is like. And the key to the word ascertain is the last part of it, which is certain. The great existential question that we all confront almost every day is one of uncertainty. We just do not know how things will turn out. And that could be a great burden because we want to know what the end is going to be sometimes before we get to the end. And, we read the Torah as if it's describing something that is unfolding in real time. And so Moses this week is sending the spies out, but the Torah as a written text comes afterwards. It's already the interpretation of what happened. And the people want to know for sure what is coming. And you can never know for sure. You can only live your life day by day. And sometimes good things will happen and sometimes bad things will happen. And you have to pick yourself up each day and go through it to see how it ends. It's not given in advance. And I think in some sense, the spies want it to be given in advance. They want to know that this is our land and we're going to live here. But it's not going to be an easy process. And that's what troubles them, I think, is that they lack a commitment to do the necessary work to take the land and settle it.
I like among the things that you said, I like I think it's very sharp to note that by the time anybody ever read the Torah, they knew the story. Okay, by the time, this is true about everything in the Bible, by the time anybody ever read it, they already knew that they were, that in our ancient past, there was a failed attempt to enter the land, and it produced a long, period of wandering. By the way, we also have, speaking of Zionist allegory, we also have the case of the Ma'apilim. After they Ma'apilim in Zion in modern parlance means the illegal immigrants post World War II, when the British were keeping them out. But in the Torah, that's not what it means. It means that after they decide not to move in, God, then they go ahead and God says, like, sorry, time's passed, and they said, no, we'll try, and then they get whooped. But by the time anybody ever read this story, they know that there was a failure in their past. And I appreciate very much the thought that religion can't be just the fairy tale that says, everything's always going to work out the way you want it. It's all just wish fulfillment. It actually sometimes also has to give you the resources to deal with frustration and failure. And so this story is such a thing. It can absolutely function that way. I am inclined to not to think this is a setup for failure. As I alluded before, I think that the designation of the scouts is a great idea, a well-intentioned attempt to win the people's commitment to what is going to be a transformative project. And if I was going to say something negative, this is now speculative. It's not that the Torah says this, but if I was going to say something negative about the 10 spies and why they might have wanted secretly to fail, is that each of the scouts are princes. Maybe they like their current power. Maybe they like the current hierarchies in society. And they've got to know that after we all immigrate to a different place and settle and have different lives, who knows if we're going to remain in power. Maybe they don't want to expose themselves to all that's going to happen in the wake of settling the land. But in principle, I think that Moshe and God expect that what's going to happen is that this is going to be a meaningful step on getting everybody ready for this huge project.
Or maybe, as you alluded before, maybe they're nihilists. Maybe they just don't. They just want to destroy the whole project. Or maybe they have already gotten a sense that Moses' leadership is questionable, and that they have challenges. They have objections to his leadership. There is no check and balance in Moses' system. There's no co-equal branches. It's
in the United States either at the moment, let me tell you.
That's right. No, but so okay, so there's a lot of we were talking before about, and my question before was, where do you think it went wrong? Where at what point in the journey, if you were writing the sketch of their conversations, what day is it? What's at what point, and of course it's all imagined and all speculation, but something must have happened. Maybe, and I'm saying maybe something happened before, because Yoshua and Kalev are already a separate entity based on at least Yoshua, and of course I'm projecting back into the story what happens in later Israel, that Judah and Ephraim are the predominant tribes, but put 12 people on a journey and give them experiences, and they're gonna be transformed. I think, literally 40 days. They're there for 40 days. 40 days is the symbolic number of transformation. Moses is up on the mountain for 40 days, right? We have 40 days between Rosh Chodesh Elul and Yom Kippur. It's a very convenient, frame to evoke the sense of transformation that can happen. Maybe they started out as decent people, and maybe they ended up as rogues.
Well, if we take the tale at its word, the failure is when they start speaking, when they come back.
Okay.
Right? That's the first time we hear that there might be something wrong with what they did. Because
Right.
they say that we felt ourselves like grasshoppers, and so they imagined us to be.
We were talking about the way that it is framed. They say the positive and then they say the negative. When, as opposed to saying, look, we got some challenges ahead, but we can do it. We can do it. Kalev in the end, he says, Yachol nuchal, we could do it, but it's over. By the time that he has to say those words, we can do it, the deck is already stacked against him.
Right. So there's a kind of thing when you're traveling. I had this experience many years ago when I was traveling in Europe. When you're in that mindset, you feel like it could go on forever. The problem is once you stop, it all comes crashing down.
Yeah.
So you could always pick up a few days later and keep moving. And I imagine I could have gone on a lot longer, but once I stopped, I couldn't move for quite a while. And the spies are entranced by the land, I think. But when they come back and they have to think about what they saw, that's when bad things happen. And so rather than let the land tell its tale, they tell the tale of the land. And it emphasizes, I think, their own role in the disaster that ensues.
We need to talk.
There's a famous line, one of the famous lines in the Parsha, that the spies, after the spies say, great land, bad people, we're not up to it. Caleb says, yeah, come on, shut up. You're sapping the people's energy. And then they say, the famous line is, Eretz ochelet yoshbehahi. The land devours its inhabitants. And there's a midrash on this, which Rashi quotes, which is that, this is not a great midrash actually for other reasons, but God struck all the Canaanites with plague so they wouldn't see the spies, and so when they were traveling around, which was like a little unduly harsh of God to the Canaanites, but when the spies are traveling around, everywhere they go, they see funerals, and then they go, man, this is just like a terrible place. Everybody's always dying here. Well, I got news for you. Everybody's always dying everywhere. Okay, there's always death. And if I were to say, again, I think this is a sort of a well-intentioned thing, but if you were to say, where did it go wrong? I might make a little, homiletical drash or something and say, it's promised land, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Everything's going to be great. Zavat chalav udvash, milk and honey. And I get there and I discover that we're all still mortal, and there's all still death, and we're going to have to figure out, where the graves are going to go. Maybe the people had a childish, unduly, hopeful, dreamy thought that this was going to be like a snap, and it was going to be like a whole Garden of Eden, and not the world. It's the world. Okay, later on. The manna in the book of Joshua, the manna stops when they cross the Jordan. Okay, the desert is, in a certain sense, the dreamy world. God feeds you miraculous food. Then you cross the Jordan, you come to the land, you got to start farming. You got to be like people in the practicalities of life. And perhaps there's some aspect of where did it go wrong, is that the spies saw there's like actual funerals here, and that's
So I'm sorry to follow up on what you say. Jeremy, what's striking is that when they're in the wilderness, they're Adam in the Garden of Eden. When they enter the land, they are Adam after the Garden of Eden, where you have to work by the sweat of your brow.
Yeah, exactly right.
And we want to hold on to paradise as long as we can. And as an adult, you learn pretty quickly you can't.
You can't.
Can we talk for a second about the way this story plays out in Jewish life? And we didn't talk about this before, but it occurs to me, and we spent the whole talk on this part of
one verse.
On the verse. But okay, so God wants to destroy the people. Moses says, Yigdal na koach Adonai, you got to overcome yourself, God, which is an audacious thing to say. And he reminds God, Adonai Yerchapayim, right? You're compassionate. Slach na lavon a'am hazeh kegoda chazdecha. Forgive the people's iniquity by your great mercy. And then Hashem says, God says, Salachti kidvarecha. Okay, so isn't it interesting the way the authors, the editors, the architects of the Machzor of Yom Kippur grafted this scene into the Kol Nidre Surah. Jerry, you want to talk about that for a second? Just like
as you alluded to, or as you're pointing us to, this is like the Kol Nidre recitation arrives at this, and God is seen to say at the beginning of Yom Kippur, not at the end, Salachti kidvarecha, Ki lechol ha'am bishgaga. Everybody, everybody's failed, but there was like well-intentioned mistakes. And kol ha'am bishgaga, everybody was a mistake. It wasn't in Jewish legal parlance. Shgaga is a mistake that you make. Mezid is like a willful, sin to just be defiant. So we start off Yom Kippur and we remind God that even when we have failed, rather significantly, the divine is a forgiving, embracing kind of presence.
There's also a suggestion that our failure is also God's failure and that God is in need of repentance too. And so when we stand before the throne, as it were, on Kol Nidre, on Yom Kippur, we are B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, who is in need of forgiveness and forgiving as well.
But are we also just projecting ourselves onto the desert experience, like we've said in many other conversations, where you come into synagogue and you're the desert people? So here at the critical moment of the desert experience, you are that people. You are that people that is wayward, that is going to be wandering. You're going to, on the eve of Yom Kippur, you're going to be reenacting a desert experience by not eating, satisfying meals at all. You are going to be asking questions over a journey. And Salachti Kidvarecha, it in a sense, cues up the mind to say, look, you don't get into the promised land so easily. You have to work now. You have to do something. Look, the other invocation is the golden calf. The Moses and that catastrophe, and the third. When God reveals His covenant of compassion to Moshe. So we have these two key elements, and of course, we would say that this episode in Bamidbar is an echo of the golden calf, because everything breaks down here, and from the breakdown, you get a chance to reconstruct everything. No.
Absolutely.
All right, so we don't get a chance to look at some of the other texts here, especially the Mikoshesh Etzim, and then the Maftir, which is Tzitzit, right?
Actually, tomorrow the Maftir won't be tzitzit. If now that I've been away from the shul, I lost the calendar a little bit. I'm almost done with my time away. But isn't tomorrow Rosh Chodesh?
No, Rosh Chodesh is in the middle of the week.
Middle of the week, so it is.
It's Mavarchim HaChodesh.
Oh, Mavarchim Chodesh. Okay.
Anyway, okay. Mm-hmm. So we have a rather well-known ending to this, which is the Lo taturu acharei levavchem, right? Don't wander after your heart. That you are drawn after them. Okay, but we have to wander off here. We've reached the end of our journey for this Parsha talk. But before we conclude, we say Mazel Tov, Rabbi Jeremy Kamilovsky, on the engagement of your son. Tell us about what Simcha.
It's wonderful stuff. My son Yedidia, my oldest son, is now engaged to a wonderful young woman named Ariel Balsam, whom we all know from Machanenu Shelanu, from Camp Ramah, and Barry was her high school teacher at Solomon Check River, Long Island, and so to Amy and I are looking forward with Sherry and Ira Balsam to the wedding of our children sometime.
What an amazing, wonderful, wonderful piece of news. We are delighted for you. Mazel Tov.
Mazel Tov.
And on behalf of the entire Parsha Talk community, a growing community of over 250 listeners, and of course, all of the people who are at Machane Ramah, hopefully, who are going to hear this today, we want to say Mazel Tov to Rabbi Jeremy Kamilovsky and the whole family.
Mazel Tov.
Thank you, guys. And by the way, we know that the staff is already up at camp, and the children are arriving next Tuesday for another Kite Alpayim Esimustayim.
Amazing. We are so happy and thankful that you have joined us for these 34 minutes and 28 seconds.
Good moments.
On behalf of everybody, let's all just say good Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
See you next week on the next edition of Parsha Talk.